Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina.
And Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
And this is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question.
Will they or won't they?
Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy?
Technically, that is two questions, Sabrina.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we didn't even answer this when you've got mail. I think we knew it was a romantic comedy. But like the one we're doing today is Bros, and I also spoiler alert. I think it is a romantic comedy.
I mean, it's funny and it's romantic, and if that's the definition, yeah. Right. For you got mail, you don't need to answer that. That's just answered by the movie existing.
I think so. Bros, 2022, so very recent. It is written and directed by Billy Eichner and... No, sorry. I immediately said this the wrong way around. It is directed by Nicholas Stoller. It is written by Nicholas Stoller and Billy Eichner that way around. It is I think basically one of the only big studio queer rom-com to exist. Like, of course, queer rom-coms exist, but they're usually indie movies. Or now Hallmark has gotten into it, but
which this movie makes fun of itself, yeah. Yeah,
and Universal is the studio who produces this. Nicholas Stoller is obviously a guy who's done a few of these things. He's done Forgetting Sarah Marshall with Jason Segel, and also the one whose title I can't remember. That's Jason Segel and Emily Blunt. Later on, and so he's sort of in the Judd Apatow circle of circle of rom-com people, sort of that kind of brand of the early mid 2000s rom-com. So it feels significant that he does this as well. And then Billy Eichner is obviously known for doing things online, I think, and I don't know what else he has actually done, but yeah.
I only knew him through Billy on the Street, which is his kind of very funny interview show where he goes, something's weird with the sound. Can you hear that too?
Yeah, I
don't know what's going on.
I don't know either.
It's like we're being hacked.
Yeah.
Oh no.
What is this?
What is that? I don't know. Now it's gone.
Maybe there
are ghosts in the wires. But yeah, Billy Eichner, Billy on the Street, which is his really funny kind of interview show clip thing. I don't even know what to call it. It's like his spiel where he runs outside in a microphone as Billy on the street, asking questions to random people, usually concerning gay things and popular culture, in a broad sense.
Yeah. And I mean, he got very famous with it. It's a Funny or Die bit, I think. And he got very famous doing this. And there's one of the most famous ones he does with Chris Evans that ended up being "Let's go lesbians, let's go" for some so he did it with Chris Evans. He did a bit where it ended up being "Let's go lesbians, let's go," that then connected to Captain America. Anyway, there's a whole thing. He became
there's more.
A meme, basically, or is the origin of a bunch of memes and famous internet things. And so he's in many ways the perfect sort of he's the Jewish gay guy who's supposed to be the new Nora Ephron. I think it sort of makes sense that he steps into the shoes of Nora Ephron because he's someone who can be very snarky about the cultural moment and has a sensibility for what a rom-com could look like. And I think the film has a lot of we'll talk about the plot in a second, meta moments of I'm writing the first gay studio rom-com, so what do they want from me kind of film. So
yeah, it has a lot of the meta. It also has a lot of his kind of combative personality from Billy on the Street in it. So he's not your usual kind of like nice guy rom-com hero like you would see in a Nora Ephron movie. At least he's edgy. He is snarky, as you said, all the time. He is very funny actually at the beginning of this movie.
So the plot of this is Billy Eichner is sort of playing a version of himself, I think, who's the sort of a bit disillusioned, snarky, queer activist. He also is a podcast host, which is fun for us. That is called The 11th Brick, because a gay white guy probably threw the 11th brick at Stonewall, because as we now know, trans people of color started this.
Shout out to Sylvia Rivera.
And Marsha P. Johnson. And he is on the board of the new to open LGBTQ History Museum in New York. And this is where we can get into the criticism and discourse of this movie. Is there are LGBTQ history museums in the United States. They have existed for a while. It is true that there isn't a genuine one in New York. Like, let's get this out of the way right now. There are a bunch of, like, the New York Public Library has queer history collections. There's the LGBT Center that has them, etc., etc. But there are also museums, including in San Francisco. So these places do exist. I think the movie is like sort of overstating, obviously, the thing. But it is also true that in the moment of the Stonewall anniversary in 2019, Stonewall 50, there was a discussion about finally like sort of consolidating a lot of collections and opening. I think this is what he's picking up on. There was this push, and I still don't know what happened to it. The pandemic sort of like, I think,
they called it this project. In the movie. They call it the National LGBTQ plus museum. So like it's kind of like the assumption of like this will be like on the level of like a Smithsonian kind of thing, which that's kind of the idea.
And the idea is, of course, that does not exist. But I know a lot of like in queer circles, criticism was like they're pretending like these institutions haven't existed before. But it is also true that this kind of scale doesn't exist. I think why he's also like from a screenwriting perspective chosen this setting is obviously to show a more diverse queer community, not just in New York, but elsewhere. And like, because it's a federal museum, it's supposed to like, it's still very New York, and he's still very much a gay Jewish white New Yorker, and he's constantly meta reflecting on this in the film, but also gives him an opportunity to put a bunch of other queer people, like queer actors who are playing these queer characters on screen. And I think because the queer community is never happy about anything and nothing can ever be perfect, this movie actually bombed at the box office and people were criticizing it a lot. But I think it's still remarkable to put into a big budget 2022 Universal Pictures like trans people of color. And like statistically, they were the only trans people of color in a movie of that scale. And that is unfortunately where Hollywood is with this. And I do think it deserves credit for at least trying to like reflect on this and like having some sort of meta conversations about this in the movie.
Yeah, I think the thing that I realized about this movie, where I started watching it and I'm like, I don't know why people don't like this. This is really funny. And then I kind of understand why people, I mean, obviously very diverse community of people will have different problems with it. But the thing that it kind of starts off with, it starts being very kind of like almost 30 Rock level meta commentary, like the name of the podcast, right? He is the white host of a podcast that is named after the fact that we celebrate the white people who did something and not the people of color, and he makes that the title of his podcast. It feels like it's a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's also kind of immediately makes him seem like an asshole because he has 1 million podcast listeners on basically putting himself out there while realizing this, while also capitalizing on it. So that was my first thought, is like, okay, I can see how that might not, some people might not like that, but like just that thing. And the humor is very in your face for I think like the first 30, 45 minutes of that movie. It's almost like, again, like that 30 Rock thing where it's like a mile a minute. There are so many jokes in there that kind of fly past you. And when you get one, you're like, oh, this is so great. This is so great. And then the movie kind of pivots into actually trying to be a more old school romantic comedy, and it kind of loses steam. And I think it's on purpose. I think it's very purposely built like this. But I also believe that there are viewers who want one thing, right? You either want the crazy Apatow, 30 Rock kind of everything out there, or you want like a real emotional depth romantic comedy. And this kind of wants to have it both ways. And it succeeds to a certain degree, but also it clearly has kind of like this dual personality.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And I think that's partially also him, again, reflecting on his privileged position quite literally when he's also like, and they're asking me to write this rom-com. And he knows he gets asked because he's still a white cis gay man, but he also realizes that that in itself is unfortunately so radical in Hollywood, and how can I use my platform to like still make it inclusive? And he's clearly struggling with that himself in the script and in the story of the movie and so on and so forth. And it's also interesting that he then is like, okay, what does a big studio want from a classic rom-com, which is clearly Nora Ephron, right? So and because he's a gay Jewish worker, he obviously comes back to it quite literally. There's a bunch of citations of her films. And then also the current like Hallmark trend, which makes it even funnier because like his opposite, like romantic lead, is Luke MacFarlane, who has since starred in a bunch of Hallmark films himself, including obviously some of the gay ones. Not just, I think, but also. And so yeah, and like the plot of how they meet is they meet in a gay club, surprise, and at first sort of have awkward run-ins, and it's the clear thing of like, he doesn't really want Lucas MacFarlane doesn't really want a relationship. Billy Eichner has actually never had one, has never been in love. So it's sort of obviously those tropes. And consciously those tropes.
Very consciously put there. And it's really funny. There's also my favorite, like this is just the throwaway line. It's like, first of all, Guy Branum in the gay club who we meet, who I just love. He's just one of the, I mean, kind of incisive, kind of not always in entirely uncontroversial with his views, but like one person that I think is way underrated in how smart and funny you can be. Like his book, where he talks about his childhood, is both like, wow, like incisive and emotional, and also really funny. There's a whole chapter in it. Sorry, this is just me going off on a tangent, where he writes about his love for the nation of Canada because he legally cannot write about his sister, and this is supposed to be a book about him, his growing up, and his sister is like a person who's kind of out of his life and who would sue him, and so he's just like, this should be a chapter about my sister, but she would sue me, so here's information about Canada. It's just kind of it's bonkers, and he's really funny in this as well.
And he, like, I didn't know much about him, but I did. He got into a lot of like fights about this movie online on Twitter because he obviously defended it because he exactly said the thing where I definitely agree with him. Is like, you don't have to love this movie, and you like, we all see your criticisms, but it's one movie written from a obviously like limited point of view, because all movies are, and we all know about the systemic issues, and Billy knows about the systemic issues, and they're literally in the movie, but you still should have fucking showed up and supported this movie, because now it bombed at the box office, and now, again, Universal Pictures and all the studios can say, gay romance does not sell, and it is the unfortunate truth. And it actually, I think, did better on streaming, because we're obviously, again, in that moment, especially 2022, it's a rough time for a film to open in theaters. But also because of the pandemic, like people knew things would end up on streaming within a couple months. Why would they go out to a theater and expose themselves to COVID or pay the exorbitant amounts that it costs to go to a theater in the US? But at the same time, like, it could have been one of those movies that a community showed up, like they did with Crazy Rich Asians, which, to be fair, was before the pandemic. So, but yeah, I'm disgruntled about it too, because once again, think you can tell he tries. He's aware of his privilege. And also, it is legitimately funny, and otherwise, it's a tropey rom-com, and this is exactly what was asked of him. And if you don't want just Hallmark to make these movies under the extreme constraints you can make a Hallmark movie in, like, this movie also tries to show the gay community. And again, like, for the tropes of, like, he doesn't want a relationship and so on, it is very specifically queer because he's interrogating a dating on Grindr, which mostly is like anonymous hookups and like reflecting on that and the fact that he obviously does them and like they still leave him like wanting and lacking, which is a thing to say. Like, he's in his 40s and it's like, I know queer people in their 40s who have the same gripe. Yes, they're glad it exists and they use it, but like it is not an app to find love on, and it's a very specific thing, and that's fine. It's an app for sex, but it has contributed to a certain culture where some people then struggle to find a romantic partner even though they want to. And then also they like, you know, and the hilarity of some of that, and like, you know, and talking about references, we could talk about the Grindr scene immediately, where he even references. He says, "Oh, it was so funny. I just watched You've Got Mail," and he's like texting this guy and he's trying to be flirty, and the other guy just want to see like an ass pic, and then he ends up like awkwardly trying to shave
and like
and like.
And then he blocks him after that. It's just
and it's just, but it also feels true what dating apps or like hookup apps are generally like, whether you're queer or not, honestly. Like, this is exactly the thing where like either you have completely pride conversations that don't lead anywhere, or you have conversations that are clearly geared at sex, but like there must be like a middle ground, and most of that doesn't exist anymore.
And I mean,
that's a comment on that too.
The immediacy of dating apps also needing to make money and not really wanting you to settle. Like, that's the whole problem with dating apps. Is like they need you to date. If you date once and then you have the love of your life and you stop, then there's no money for the date. There's like a whole discourse surrounding that, obviously, as well. The thing that they might make fun of with the dating apps, and this is where where I actually like originally started mentioning Guy Branum, because he says that this is like a launch party for a gay dating app called Zellweger or something like that, where you just like talk about your favorite Hollywood actresses and go to sleep. And I'm just like, this is perfect. This is such a funny, because it also like picks up on like a very like the specificity of dating apps and like how like niche they have become. It's really, really funny.
Yeah, or the fact that they are not that niche. I think it's a comment on the fact that like in You've Got Mail, the chat rooms are super specific to, I'm over 30 and live in Upper West Side New York, and these are my interests. But dating apps make it very hard to be more specific, other than like, oh, this is the gay hookup app. But like most of the things are completely interchangeable. I've been on Bumble, I've been on Hinge. They almost look the same. They have the same prompts for your profiles. And they don't make this nuance necessarily possible of like just finding
but I meant
someone
in terms
to
of
talk about
communities, right? There's like very specific dating apps for very specific like there's like the Jewish dating app, and there's like the Amish. Is there an Amish dating app? There should be,
Probably not. I think it's called Raising a Barn, but it's but like it's Anyway, but yeah, I think it's obviously it does talk a bit about like the loss of romance and intimacy in this context, without wanting to vilify wanting hookups and wanting free sex. That he's not criticizing that either. It's like, okay, I want one thing and that's not what I'm getting from it. I get something else from it, but that alone, like there's early on where he's like, and then after like this awkward Grindr hookup, walks through New York and feels like this like post-coital glow, and it's like
that's his Nora Ephron scene, right? Walking through New York, talking about that's his Meg Ryan.
And between that and like having good friends that I love hanging out with, it almost feels like I have a romantic life, is what he's sort of saying. And,
it's like on his podcast, right? Yeah.
And it feels very Sex in the City too, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we have sex and we have friends. Do we still need romance? ? And the answer for people who aren't aromantic and aren't looking for this is usually yes, because it is still a secret third thing that is neither of these. And and I mean, he's also like, I think in a loving way poking fun at like particularly the queer community having embraced polyamory, obviously, and it's like they're not
Why is
portrayed in any.
Steve there? That's like the scene where like the like two of them try to hook, or like and then like it becomes three, and then of all of a sudden like Steve is there, and it's just like I love that scene because it is so awkward, and it's so like kind of showing his desperation with kind of like what he's ended up in. What I found really interesting is the way in which he starts off basically just kind of saying that he doesn't want this kind of heteronormative like one person thing. Like he specifically says love is not love, and like that at the end of the movie, the song is like specifically that he says like no, it is different, and he wants to celebrate that. And I think one of the criticisms of the movie was also like, and it's kind of like inherent in the fact that it is a romantic comedy, right? Is that he kind of gives up on that, like gay love is or gay sex is different and specific, and we shouldn't fall into the heteronormative trap. And then in the end, the movie does exactly that. And that is a problem that's inherent if you're gonna want to do a romantic comedy that ends that way, that's going to end that way, but you also want to put that out there. I think he handles it the best he can, but it is an inherent tension in the movie.
Let me take a step back because I was talking about something different. I wasn't talking about him having like group sex even with like Luke MacFarlane. I was talking about his friend circle very early on when like the one of his couple friends now has a third partner, and he sort of envisions as like calling the grandma, telling, "Hey, we're consensually fucking a third person," and the grandma's like, "Yay!" But like he's like also in this thing where he's like, "Okay, is this the future of what we're doing?" And it's like, yeah, and then that does feed into the whole and by the end they're probably gonna have a monogamous relationship. But I honestly think this is again where like a lot of the criticism I don't fully agree with is because I do think queer love and queer relationships and queer sex are different, even when they're monogamous. They don't make them heterosexual. It's still different. And I think that is, this is where I agree with him. And both of these things can be true at the same time. And I mean, there's also at the very end, when they do get together and they have their big when Harry met Sally, we run towards each other moment. He's like sort of proposing to him, but not marriage, but like let's date for 3 months and then reevaluate. And that alone is also different. Is I guess it's a more modern sensibility, but it's also like a queer sensibility of like just because we now decide we want to be in a monogamous relationship, we also don't immediately think this has to be like it and the one, and this kind of like it has to end in marriage and it has to end in this. And like just that this is a constant thing, just like his couple friends, they were in presumably in a monogamous relationship with each other, and then added a third at some point, which is not necessarily something that they planned on when they first started dating. I think there's room for other things, and I do get why people might be disgruntled about like, oh, but he doesn't want this. Like people are allowed not to want polyamorous relationships too.
Yeah. The thing that you mentioned in the beginning, the scene where he imagines like them calling up grandma and all that. I think that is another reason, not specifically the fact that doing the way this scene is framed, because this movie, in the end, in the first half, often has these kind of like aside cutaway things that you would see in a thing like 30 Rock or Girls Five Ever, like these kinds of like very Tina Fey coded things. But it, first of all, never really makes clear what is actually true and what is actually the crazy scene, because it starts at this elevated level, right? You're never entirely sure, wait, is this actually meant to happen in the story, or is this meant to happen in his head and as a commentary on the story? And then it kind of abandons these moments halfway through. And that to me was like, it felt like you're kind of like you're handing over the reins, the directorial reins, to someone else for the rest of the movie, and they just decide to make a different movie, which I think is a little bit to the detriment of the movie. The tone of the movie changing, if it's done deliberately, I think that can make sense. But it feels a little weird that you start off with these absolutely crazy like fantasy scenes, and then you just don't continue with it.
Yeah. By the way, I keep having weird like audio issues still, and if they're still in the recording, I know you're going to be very pissed with them, but we'll see.
I'm at this point like just for you listening why Sabrina sounds like she's sitting at the bottom of a well. We had microphone problems, or not, we had
Yeah.
connection problems somehow, and we're doing the best we can. We will fix as much as we can in post. I think it's
sometimes
fine. We're just gonna have to be extra brilliant this time around.
Yeah. But yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, and I think, I mean, you also pointed this out that like the tone changes also because he is a person starting to change, and I think when he starts out, he's clearly very snarky and very cynical, but also because he's unhappy, right? I mean, he's trying to tell himself he doesn't want the kind of relationship that he, like the romantic relationship, but also because he doesn't have it and doesn't seem to be able to find it. And I think that's a very relatable point to be. You get very easily like discouraged with everything and try to make the best of it and try to tell yourself you don't need this to be fulfilled, and you still sort of kind of do. Or still want it. It's fine to want it even if you don't need it. And Luke MacFarlane is obviously the other one, and there's a bit of a conflict between them because he doesn't feel like he lives up to his standards. Like Billy Eichner is very like intellectual. He constantly talks about like it's again meta about queer representation and queer history, and he's very politically involved and he cares a lot, but he is also intense about it. And that is also very, very relatable to me, who A has been literally on the board of a queer archive, and B, like, teaches queer media representation. We're doing this podcast talking about these kinds of things, but at the same time also sit at home crying watching Hallmark movies that I know are bad, right? And he lives at that intersection of like not trying to, and that's maybe because that's also why I like this movie, because to me it's relatable. Yes, he's a bit cringe at times, but he's still relatable. I know this person is me, you know. And then Luke MacFarlane is just like, he feels intimidated by it because he's not like as intellectually, he's not stupid, he's just more of a jock type, but he still clearly has a large, like, he's still a very nice guy, and he clearly is intelligent, and he's, you know, it's just different. Like, he has a different emotional intelligence, maybe he's just, you know, this, and we get this backstory of him being obviously this jock and like still not, also having had sort of a miserable existence as like a closeted person for a very long time from a more clearly more conservative family, and you know, and still being a guy who's like, for a gay guy, not interested in cliche gay things, or not being very like flamboyant either, but like also like clearly having that struggle of like not being gay enough, maybe. Like, it's just like Billy I so differently has a like, am I gay enough, am I too gay, what is the right amount of gay, which is also very relatable. And they both have that struggle from the opposite ends of the spectrum, also about like physicality, right, about the constant Luke MacFarlane, like, you know, having testosterone injections to be more buff, and like identifying himself over the fact that he's like this cliche ripped gay guy, and Billy Eichner struggling with the fact that he's not.
And then trying to become that, right?
Yeah.
Like that's part of his growth is actually, okay, maybe I need to, this is the kind of bros from the title, maybe I need to become one of the bros. And one of the funniest scenes is when he's in the gym and then he lowers his voice where he's just like working out, saying like monosyllabic gym things to this guy who's coming on to. And after he starts his whole like workout routine thing, and then kind of realizing after basically they have sex, and then his voice changes, and the guy's like, "What? You were just pretending?" And he's like, "Yeah, sorry, I thought I would try this," and then kind of just asks, "So just for like for the record, if I had spoken to you in my regular voice, would you still have, you know, wanted me?" And the guy was like, "Yeah." And I think at that point it also changes. He's like, "Okay, I don't have to be a bro."
Yeah, and Luke MacFarlane realizes, on the other hand, that like he can, you know, he can still like sports and do this, but he can also, and this is the cute little backstory, he always wanted to make little chocolates. He wanted to be a chocolatier.
So fucking Hallmark. I love that.
Also, yeah, it's also again Hallmark, and like, but also the fact that it's obviously like a very effeminate gay thing that he didn't allow himself to like, because society criticizes him for him to like it, but also like And he just starts to lean into that and starts to do it and just try. And like, doesn't need to necessarily even turn this into a career. He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. What was the term for that? But like, he does people's
Estate
wills. Like,
law, yeah.
estate law, yeah. Which, funnily enough, is also the profession of Michael Urie's character in Shrinking. So is this a gay job now? Is it one of those gay jobs? But anyway, so yeah, like sort of both of them arriving at the like thing that there is a middle ground, right? You can be a jock and like to make little chocolates, and you can be a political activist and so sometimes watch Hallmark movies and be fine with it. And both of you are gay enough, like, which is like a constant eternal struggle for queer people, because the community itself also keeps reflecting back at you that you're not. Like, and obviously larger society.
It's in any kind of group, like any definition of, gender roles or masculinity or whatever will have like a circumscribed, this is what you need to do to belong to that group, right? And the more kind of privileged a certain view is, the more rigid those lines are going to be. So you can really see him like struggling with that, and them kind of like breaking that, which I really think is really to the credit of this movie, that you just kind of get to be you in the end, which is kind of a nice touch.
Yeah, and I mean, this is part of like what a lot of rom-coms are doing, right? It's about always, again, the effort thing of like, you need to work through your own issues to be a capable partner.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what we just talked about with You've Got Mail, right? These people, both Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan's characters, are with people they shouldn't be with, and realize that in the end, like, okay, maybe just because this is the right thing, or this is what society seems to think is the kind of person I should be with, I don't have to.
And it's true to, obviously, again, I think he got a lot of specifically gay dating culture things in there, not just the Grindr and the explicit thing of the ass pics, and also the, again, like having group sex as a normalized thing, and like of even when he starts dating him, that they're hooking up with this other couple, and there's like, it never makes fun of the thing. It pokes fun at the weird situation it sometimes gets you in. But this movie is not inherently critical of neither like any form of polyamory or groups. It's not. It's just like, it's actually treating it as like a normal thing within the queer community, which I thought was really nice. And is when he sort of like decides to go in the middle of the sex and is like, oh yeah, nice to meet you, it's super nice to meet you, and let me tell you, this is actually very realistic. It's not always like, it is not unrealistic, and I thought it was really nice. And the other thing that I thought was way too real was every time they have a fucking board meeting for this movie.
Oh yeah, can we talk about the board meetings? The board meetings are so funny, yes, and so many good actors in there.
Yeah, again, this is where all the diversity comes in. There's various trans people of color in there. There's also, I need to look up the actors' names I did before and immediately forgot. Hang on. I don't want to accidentally stop my recording here. Hang on. But I know Jim Rash from Community is in there, bisexual, who always harps on about bi erasure. I like, tag yourself. I'm Jim Rash. These meetings.
And this insistence the one he put with the bisexual terrorists. That is such a funny line.
Oh my god!
Such a funny line.
The thing that completely broke me was him going, I want audio-animatronic bisexuals, like Disney's Hall of Presidents. I'm like, can you make a reference that is more me-coded than wanting audio-animatronic bisexuals, like Disney's Hall of Presidents? Jesus fucking Christ. All right, Miss Lawrence.
Yeah.
On there, Miss Madison. Jones, who I know from Glee, is like the butch lesbian. And again, Jim Rash from Community, who's also openly bisexual, or queer, like came out ages ago. Like, I mean, it's not just his Community character.
Eve Lindley is super funny in this, especially with the because she's kind of like younger and like hipper with this like phone stuff and whatever, like Insta stuff, and like her line where at some point she looks at where Billy Eichner makes a reference to Schitt's Creek, which is also obviously a relatively recent movie, and then she goes, "Oh, this is who you remind me of, Eugene Levy." I just fell off my chair. It's just such a funny reference. And like next to me, Carrie's sitting there as we're watching this, and she's like, "Oh right," and she's like, "That's so good."
Yeah.
Eve Lindsay, she was in the Jason Segel show that was kind of like short-lived and it's like very weird meta show as well.
Something, yeah.
It's a really good show. It's weird though. It has a weird ending.
And then there's like a few other, like, I mean, and that's the other thing. There's so many other like queer actors in this, even if they're not like, Guillermo Diaz is actually playing, I mean, he could be bi, like, this is not reflected, but he's a female partner, like one of his friends. He's an actor, I know, mostly from Scandal, but he's like gay in real life. So like clearly there was care put into casting.
Bowen Yang.
Bowen Yang is the crazy
the rich guy, producer guy.
And then obviously Harvey Fierstein is in this. Like, you cannot make a fucking gay movie without Harvey Fierstein. But he also has a really nice moment because he's from the generation of the AIDS crisis, where he's like, they're looking at old photos of his friends who would come to Provincetown. The fact that Provincetown is in this, like, you know, this like the gay enclave that everyone goes to in the summer. And the fact he's there and is like, and Luke MacFarlane is like, oh, are any of your friends still coming here? And it's clear that most of them are dead, right? And he's like, well, you know, I didn't do this. I was somehow, when I realized I was going to be one of the people who survived, which is really Harvey Fierstein's life, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's trying to put all of this into a rom-com, and it actually sort of manages. Like, I think that is an incredible feat. Like, it touches on so many different aspects of queer life, of definitely more of like white gay life from a specific like upper middle class and so on and so forth, but it still gets a lot in there.
It is quite expansive in just the stories it tells, and including the story when he is introduced to Luke MacFarlane's parents and they're at the restaurant, and then Billy Eichner tries to basically just like be very political, and Luke MacFarlane's character is just sitting there kind of like wishing him not to be, and the fact that that's kind of like a sticking point between them, right? That for Billy Eichner, that's like his thing, like you can't make me not be me around these people, and how they're kind of navigating that also feels very, very well done.
Yeah, it's just very realistic, like that you're going to clash over this, and that the tension is high with these conservative parents, because on the one hand you want something better for your partner because he sort of springs on them, he's clearly miserable. And it's true, but you don't like break that to the parents when everyone is attendance at this dinner. So like, I get that they're both pissed after that, and it's just like there's no good way out other than both of them reflecting on their own issues, which they subsequently end up doing. Because he's also too much. Like, he also always gets told he's too much, which again feels very relatable. But he's also extra too much in the scene because he's overcompensating.
Yeah, clearly. It really reminded me of, since we just did You've Got Mail, the scene in the cinema where Meg Ryan says, "I didn't vote," and then Greg Kinnear says, "I forgive you," and then he like flips out and is like, "Forgive me," like as if that was like a thing that I needed to be forgiven to. Like, they're completely different people in that sense, and they you can kind of see both their perspectives, but also like they clearly should not be together at that moment. And in the one way, it splits them up completely. In the other one, it's the conflict that brings them back together.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, again, he then tries to date someone, like Luke MacFarlane tries to date someone who's very similar to him, which is his old hockey high school friend who ends up coming out after running into him again. But it's clearly like, sometimes, you know, opposites attract, or it's actually nice to have these sort of differences as long as you can arrive at the middle ground of it all. At least that's, you know, with rom-coms try to tell us that this is how it can sometimes work if you like, at least embrace each other's difference too, and like do this. And and then they do the thing where they work through it and then finally realize they want to be with each other and literally do the Harry running through the street.
The Nora Ephron quotations are not just that he's watching. By the way, I think I mentioned this before, the fact that the scenes of him lying on the couch watching TV are among the funniest, just the way that he does it and the way he mopes so well on camera. And it's kind of like a send-up of all of these scenes from many, many rom-coms. And then obviously the quotations, right? The running, the Billy Crystal run is in this. I love that.
Yeah, and also again the fake Hallmark movie titles are so funny. I didn't write all of them down, but there's suddenly one that's about a throuple and about like a bi character, which, you know, again within the scope of Hallmark would never happen. But obviously again that's a meta commentary on the fact that this movie is doing that. And the Hallmark still won't save you, but he still loves the Hallmark, and it's obviously also really funny because it's just overdrawn.
It just feels like a writer's room getting together, coming up with ridiculous Hallmarky titles.
Yeah, and then there's the stunt casting thing where it's like, and this is Home Alone, but with Sarah Paulson.
I lost it. It's just and her with the hands on the oh, it's just so funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually look at the notes, but I think we checked that stuff, like a lot of the stuff. And
oh yeah, Christmas with Either is one of the titles.
Christmas with Either, yeah, I loved it. Fucking hell, I want Christmas with Either. I don't know. I just have all caps notes saying, and I think this is him sort of riffing on that because they go to this like pop-up thing of like the Hallmark,
like a
Christmas
Hallmark
movie,
Christmas market,
and he's like, what? And it's like, and then they have, and this is I think a quote from like just Billy Eichner's character here, a non-binary Ebenezer Scrooge. You know, this is also like,
that's like the 30 Rock of it all, right? Yeah, that's the kind of like throwaway line.
Hollywood thinks of diversity of like, oh, we're just going to do an existing thing and then make someone queer, and this is queer representation, which again is not. This is again when they probably pitched to him like, write a queer rom-com, but like make a standard rom-com, but they happen to be gay, and then he was clearly like, I am going to do this, but I'm also not, and I'm going to like talk about this. And you know, and you have all these, like, I mean, you have some celebrity cameos like Kristen Chenoweth and Deborah Messing of like these sort of modern day gay icons, obviously.
Which is really funny because like in the end, when the big scene comes in, he's like, I never thought I would say that, but Deborah Messing, shut up, or something like that. It's actually Deborah Messing is what I wrote down right after the bisexual terrorists.
Where was it? Nova, which is very early on, but like I don't know, or when they pitched we just need to come back also to the museum board meetings. There's the one thing was like, you know, in the Natural History Science Museum, it's a big whale hanging from the ceiling. What if it was a lesbian and it's Jodie Foster? That is so 30 Rock. But also like the sort of also having against someone like me who work in a queer archive board, and the fact that they constantly infight about the representation of the respective groups, but then in the end also have this meeting where they apologize to each other because he sort of had a freak out also caused by the breakup, and like, is this gay enough? Like, do white gay men even still have a place in all of this? And then has to apologize, and rightfully has to apologize for like freaking out. And there's this nice moment of like, you know, I don't need to tell a black trans woman about anger. But also that they then arrive like, you know, but like, we're still a family, we're still a community. You might fight about all the things all the time, but we're still a community, and the bigger problem is the rest of the world. And this is just very true. We would constantly have these infights within the community, and they're worth having.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
which is why I think really a lot of the criticism of the movie felt like they didn't watch that part of the movie, right? Where they're like, you see, because the museum is in a sense in its trying to get everything in and kind of like doing it in a weird way that represents what different people want, like the whatever roller coaster or something that they build or ride or whatever, and that kind of thing. And in the end, you should still come together. By the way, the museum opening scene, like the you can tell this was a movie that had a bit of a budget because that was big and it was really funny. My absolute favorite part though was the full color Pete Buttigieg bust. I just completely cracked up at that.
And also, like, I mean, the whole justification of the museum, which comes in with Bowen Yang's donation money, who wants a like dark ride on
like a Jurassic Park
gay trauma.
Yeah, just so good.
And like, I mean, I constantly teach about the Disneyfication of like museums. That was just again this weekend, so it's just like really on point and really funny. Because also like MacFarlane's character is like, well, you know, it's depressing. It's just about AIDS and like other persecution and so on and so on. And it's true. Like, I mean, this is always sort of the line you have to walk. If you're going to educate about queer history, it's going to be fucking depressing because it has been depressing, but you also want to highlight like the victories of this and like finding that middle ground and like identifying important people, like who are they important to and why. And it's like, it actually really nicely reflects that when she's trying to get in, like, was Abraham Lincoln gay, which is like a never dying thing also within public history. It again also feels super real, and it's like, can we even talk about the fact that he was queer? We don't know. It's like, yeah, that is part of the problem of doing queer history always. And it's so like I'm like, I don't know, people who hate this movie have not done this kind of work because it's just, or they didn't want the mirror of what it's like doing this kind of work. Like, it's just surreal.
I don't know. But it just feels mostly people would see this and not like, I mean, it also kind of feels like a bit of a pile-on thing, like an internet, it's not as representation heavy as we wanted it to be because it is made by this. And to be fair, Billy Eichner is a person you either love or hate, just generally. And like, just Billy on the street, I could just like watch him antagonizing in a funny way random people. I could watch him a very long. I understand how some people feel very uncomfortable by basically almost being accosted on the street by this man. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I mean, he knows this part of the shtick there, and it's also the Disney-fied version of it where he follows like Luke MacFarlane's lead of like, oh, maybe you could like talk to historic figures, and it's like Amy Schumer as Eleanor Roosevelt, and then it's literally Amy Schumer as Eleanor Roosevelt. But also my personal favorite is Seth Meyers as Harvey Milk.
So
which
good.
Is obviously just putting Seth Meyers in because Billy Eichner has done one of these bits with Seth Meyers, and, you know. Seth Meyers.
Kenan Thompson as
was it James Baldwin? No,
yes, it was James Baldwin. It was James Baldwin. Yes.
Yeah, but it's like, it's so stupid. But yeah, Kenan Thompson as James Baldwin. Yeah, just found it. But yeah, I mean, again, I mean, and so it's and at the same time, again, it manages to be this like rom-com, classic F1-esque rom-com plot of like, they work through their whole issues, they get together in the end. It is still not like we're gonna live happily ever after necessarily, but we're actually gonna try this time, and we like each other, and that's it. And I mean, also I would watch Luke MacFarlane in anything. He's just genuinely likable. Like, which also I think makes him really nice opposite Billy Eichner, who's more abrasive and again sort of a love or hate him kind of guy. But like, I think you can hate Luke MacFarlane. I want to meet someone who hates him. I'm sure a lot of cynical gays hate him, but like, he's very easy on the eyes, but also he has a certain like warmth to him, I think, which is also part of why he has these Hallmark movies. He's like, you know, like obviously follows every beauty standard in the world, but he has a certain like warmth. And also my anecdote is he was at a German science fiction convention because he was on a sci-fi show for a while that nobody saw.
I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. But I knew him from these kinds of things. This was before Bros, but like he also was in Brothers and Sisters with one of those like family like drama shows where he was one of the first like, you know, heteronormative white gay couples. So, and he was out, like he was out at the time already, and so I asked him about it. And the same con also had Wilson Cruz, like, so you had two of the few like people who came out in this business. I mean, Wilson Cruz much earlier, obviously, but like I went up to him at like the autograph thing, and I was like, "So yeah, have you actually like met Wilson, right? Because it's a valid question. They're both actors, and like sort of Wilson way more activist about it." And it's like, "Oh yeah, like we don't know each other well, but like this is the funniest bit. We met at the gym." Like this is again like I think this is the thing that this movie proves. Stereotypes exist for a reason, and we have the right to make fun of them because they fucking exist. Like these are two. They could have met literally anywhere else. These are two out gay actors. There aren't that many of them. I know they must exist in different circles also because of like race and class things, but at the same time, you'd think they could have met at a movie premiere after party. No, where did they meet? In the gym, but because they both live in New York, or like we're both shooting in Canada, you know. Anyway, very nice, but he's a very nice guy from what I could tell. So he's the perfect romantic lead, especially for this kind of thing. I think actually.
I mean, he was also in Platonic, right? Yeah. That's him as well, which is
which is both Nicholas Stoller. Yeah.
Platonic also featuring a bunch of the cast from this movie, so you can see the connections.
Let me see if he's doing another. I don't see any Hallmark movies coming up from him, but last year he did one called Catch Me If You Claus, where he was Santa Claus, so you know.
They're really running out of Christmas-related puns. Like, that's not a good one.
He was hot Santa Claus in Hallmark movie after Making Bros. It's like, I'm still gonna get the Hallmark check. And he should. But yeah. Anyway. Is there anything else we want to add for this? Because I think.
Yeah, I just wanted. There's one line that I wrote down because it really made me laugh. It's like what the whole like how him being down on Schitt's Creek thing is really funny. Where he says at some point, "Gay sex was more fun when straight people were scared by it." Fucking Schitt's Creek. That was. That was really funny. Just like I like the pop culture stuff that's drawn into it. And again, it is. I keep making that 30 Rock comparison. There is so much of it that flies by. It's probably a movie you need to watch a bunch of times until you realize, like, oh, this also was a reference to something. And you'd probably just like watch it through once more for all the ridiculous Hallmark titles.
Oh yeah, I did write this down, which I think is. Given that, like, Nora Ephron always has this Jewish perspective, but, like, it's always about Christmas at the same time, which doesn't, you know? I mean, we know a lot of Jewish people do have started to celebrate Christmas, so Hanukkah never really features in these things all that much. And there's that scene here where it is the reference where they buy the Christmas tree together in the streets of New York.
Yeah.
And A, Luke McFarlane carries it by himself because he can. And B, it cuts immediately to them carrying like the massive menorah through the street. He's Jewish and it's Hanukkah as well. And like it's so funny. Like it's just these kinds of things that are in there, and I think that's actually incredibly smart. And yeah, I mean we still get again like a bunch of like more explicit gay sex in it too, which
which again is not typically like this is again I think like a genre thing that's really not a thing that's in romantic comedies, in straight romantic comedies typically. Like you get like a scene like the When Harry Met Sally fades out scene, definitely. So again, like if you're like a genre person, you might just be not really what I'm looking for.
To be fair, the Judd Apatow comedies are doing sex comedies too, which is why this makes sense.
Which is also, and I understand, like, it's not a Judd Apatow. This is the other thing, though. It is not a Judd Apatow comedy, and I know people like them. I never liked them as much as like a kind of Ephron-esque romantic comedy. Like if like
but again, Nicholas Stoller has worked like it's that kind of like it's the larger circle of these like.
But this is not really setting out to be a Judd Apatow type comedy. It's setting out to be an Ephron-esque comedy.
Normalize sex in some of these things more, but it's I mean, otherwise it's still mostly indie movies that do that, like Sleeping with Other People, which we should do at some point, for instance. But yeah, it's in there. in it's even used like in a plot way of like of interrogating masculinity, because there's that moment where Luke MacFarlane tells him to fuck him, which, you know, in terms of like topping and bottoming, like there's a certain cliche attached to it in masculinity, like, you know, that it's more masculine to top than to bottom, quite obviously,
Where he says
which
he's
is part of
birth
the
and the
discourse.
guy just rolls his eyes like that.
Yeah,
That one,
which is
yeah,
also,
yeah, yeah.
that is also a trope, but like the fact that Luke MacFarlane, who's the more cliche masculine character and clearly struggles with, like, you know, also wanting to do the little chocolates, it's a big thing for him to bottom. And it is a whole thing. And the fact that that's also in there in this like massive studio production, I mean, come on. Like, I honestly still don't know what else he was supposed to do. I feel like he used everything he could from this platform he was given within the constraints of doing Universal Picture.
It does feel a
Like,
little bit like an internet pylon where you need to be 100% exactly what I want or you're nothing. That's
yeah.
like a very internet way of being. You see this also in political discourse. You see it in all kinds of things. And the understanding of like the thing that we do, like looking at media and understanding its history and how it works, most people just don't understand that, and they don't understand why this big studio rom-com couldn't have been two people of color, couldn't have. They don't understand those mechanics of it, and that's not to excuse the fact that this is the constraint, but I think people just need to be much more aware of there are constraints to all media you consume, and when you notice them, that should give you something to think, but it shouldn't necessarily make you criticize the people who work within the constraints and try to expand them. In the end, I mean, yeah, I understand the effect, and again, we're two white people looking at this, so it's not necessarily a perspective that's universal, but
Yeah,
it
but also
is clearly
just
there.
that's also from the like the perspective of the queer community, and it's like not one text will ever encompass everything you wanted to, and that is always the problem, that if you have such scarce representation, you always think the one thing that's going to come out needs to be like saving you or whatever, or like you wanted to reflect on all your personal experience because you're so starved for it, but it's not going to do that. And like, so I just want to say, like, just give it another shot. Or if you never watched it because you just read the online discourse about it and you didn't go to cinemas in 2022, just find it now and just, you know, take it for what it can be, being, again, universal.
Yeah. And realize we talked about, like, is it a romantic comedy? It's not like it is very much the structures of it. It isn't like your kind of classic thing, but it is both romantic and this is the thing that I really want to say of all the movies I've watched for this podcast. It is the actually funniest one that I've seen, especially the first half. There are so many laugh out loud scenes. And that, I mean, it is just a really funny movie. So if you like that kind of thing, if you like romantic comedies, if you like also that kind of meta commentary that we've talked about in like shows like 30 Rock, just watch it.
Yeah, and I think because there was such a pile-on, and also unfortunately didn't make it to people that should have seen it. Like, my queer best friends had not heard of this somehow, and they're on Tumblr. Like, where you would at least for it to show up. But
the way your voice just was very disappointed there.
Yeah, but like, it's a thing, like, and I looked on Tumblr, there's not much of it on Tumblr, which tells you things. It's because, I mean, Tumblr still skews younger even now, because a lot of people left, and now it's very Gen Z in parts. But the fact that Gen Z sort of also didn't engage with this is probably also part of it, because they don't understand. They're also the ones who are, like, it was also other gay people being cynical that are in this generation, like Gen Xers. But also I think it just didn't reach the Gen Z queer crowd because they would also criticize it again. And it's like, because they weren't there and they don't even understand the significance of this because they already were surrounded. They already grew up with Glee, which also, by the way, one of the best lines in the movie that sums up a lot of, like, I think the discourse around it is also, we had AIDS, they had Glee. And that is such a stark difference between already, like, a couple generations. Like, Gen X is still, like, on the precipice of being directly affected by AIDS, and then by millennials, it's already Glee if you're, like, a younger millennial. Like, it's it's wild. Like I'm in the middle of it, and I'm like obviously more like academically educated in a lot of this stuff now, so I can reflect on the historic dimensions of it. But I'm in the middle of it, so at least I also have the privilege of like having experienced both. Like I don't know if it's a privilege to have
Both the
experienced
AIDS
the
crisis and
discrimination.
Glee. Weird.
Yeah, but like it's not. But it's also like because it gives me a perspective that I think you easily lose when you're too young. And I'm so happy for them that they didn't have to experience it, but it also sometimes makes them very fucking ignorant. And, but also the older people have gotten way too cynical about like hating things like Heartstopper when I was like, Heartstopper would have fucking saved you when you were 15, maybe
What are people complaining about when it comes to Heartstopper?
Because it's also too saccharine and it's not really, again, I think...
I think this brings us, like, we can kind of lead on to what are our taglines, or what the tagline for this movie. Does it have one?
Hang on.
Because I don't think I came across one.
I mean, we don't really do these anymore. Also, I do want to point out, because I'm seeing it here too, but I wrote it down. The Love Is Here to Stay is in this, Nat King Cole, which is also, again, like this very Efron soundtrack choice. But, it's a boring tagline.
There's a second one.
It is true. There's a romantic comedy that gives you all the feels. Yeah, fuck that.
I mean, that is
a boy meets
bro story.
Love story. Yeah, which is
okay. They're not great. Mine is the kind of like a line that comes at the end of the movie, which also kind of reflects on this. We need more movies from more perspectives in this regard, which is go write your own damn story.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any point on one. I just want to repeat that I want audio-animatronics, bisexual audio-animatronics, like Disney's all the presidents.
Just basically, your tagline should be bisexual audio-animatronics and like with an exclamation mark. That's the tagline.
Are bisexual terrorists.
I didn't quite understand how they got to that point where they're talking about it, but it's so funny.
No, it's about bad gays. It's about that we have to also reflect on the fact that there's people who behave badly in history and were not just great. And this is also sometimes part of the struggle, like, gay Nazis and stuff. Like, what are you going to do? And it's like, I'm sure there are a lot of bisexual terrorists.
The way he says it so appeasingly is just so funny.
Yeah, but then also the immediate after, which I love, is like, well, there are trans terrorists. Well, Caitlyn Jenner.
Ooh, it's like shots fired.
Rightfully, I mean, she still fucking hangs out with Donald Trump. So, but yeah, anyway, yeah. No,
that's pros.
That's pros.
Watch it.